Hi, everybody, and welcome to this week's edition of Straight Talk with Bren and Warwick Bar from the Straight, brought to you by our sponsors, Darley and Inglis. Today, we mark the end of the racing season. We crown the champions and discuss the most significant aspects and the great improvers of 24 and 25. We cast an eye forward to the 25-26 season. We have an exclusive chat with trainer Henry Dwyer, who was headed to Goodwood with his star sprinter Asfoora. In breeding, Zoustar crowned champion sire, plus a look at all the sires making their first appearances at the breeding barn this season. And finally, in wagering, more compliance challenges as ACMA wields its power. And will the federal government impose gambling ad restrictions? Warwick, great to have you on board. Nice to have a debutante. Tim away this week, and it's good to have you on board. You're best described as probably the quiet achiever of the straight. You work away in the background, work very hard to make us all look good. Before we get stuck into our conversation topics, and maybe the audience might want to know a bit more about you, and you've been at this racing journalism caper for a fair while now.
Probably about 30 years, Bren, which makes me feel a bit old, but anyway, that's the way it is. Yeah, started off country newspapers in 1986. A paper in Victoria, Colac Herald, which I met that was owned by a good racing man called Frank Gannon.
Yep.
He had some good horses that he raced, including a horse called Princely Heart.
Yep.
So he was very encouraging to the start of my career, and basically went from there. Moved to Sydney, worked in a few harness racing publications, worked at Australian Associated Press, had 2 stints there, which is the national news agency, and actually went back there in 2010 and then found my way to the straight in 2023.
You certainly did, and you've been an absolute rock for us here as we've worked through our launch phase over the last 20 months, and we've worked very hard together to make this work. And yeah, it's good to be able to get you on Straight Talk and talk about a few things. I guess, as I mentioned before, we're reaching the end of the racing season. Thursday, we're recording this Wednesday, but tomorrow will be the end of the racing season. Premierships are pretty much decided. They're probably a little bit of a question over Brisbane at the moment, which will be decided today. But if you want to just give us a quick sort of national runaround, Warwick, for those who are unaware, obviously, Willie Pike with a 5th national jockey's title and Kieran Maher with his 3rd consecutive national trainer's crown. I mean, having a look around, what sort of stood out to you about, what we've seen out of the 24-25 season?
Well, I suppose it's been a bit the same in Sydney. You got James McDonald, Chris Waller. I don't know, probably the emergence of the 2 female jockeys in Queensland, which will be decided today.
Yep.
Angela Jones and Emily Lang. Rochelle Mills in South Australia. Yeah, I'm probably try to identify trainers or jockeys who are possibly on the move.
Yeah.
Coming into next season. I think the best tip I can give you there, Bren, is the guy from your part of the world, Jackson Radley, who finished 2nd in the Tasmanian Premiership, but looks fairly well suited to make a move to Victoria, possibly linking with the Lindsay Park team. He looks very polished rider, looks quite mature for his years, and I think that's the best tip I can give you for 2025, 26.
What is interesting when you look at that, he'll be joining a stable. I pointed out and run the numbers this week, an article there, Warwick, that the Lindsay Park, the Hayes brothers, have the most improvement of any stable in terms of pure wins this year. I mean, that's significant from their perspective. They've increased their scale. That's a key part of it, but getting more wins is an important part as well. I think it's the biggest, most successful season for Lindsay Park since sort of 28-19. And there was a bit of a rebuild, obviously, when David Hayes left and went to Hong Kong, and now the 3 brothers together seem to be moving well. So any jockey would do well to join them. It's a funny one, though, because we look at these premierships and sometimes we sit there and go, well, they're just stats. Do they really matter? There was a really interesting social media post yesterday from Kieran Maher Racing, where he was talking about the achievement of winning, becoming champion trainer for the 3rd straight season in Australia. And, Kieran has copped a bit of criticism this year about the scale of his operation and the challenges of that. And he was quite emotional about sort of, the effort and sacrifices that are required to get where they need to be. So, that's true. The other interesting point I wanted to point out, 5 of the top 6 in the Jockeys Premiership are WA-based. Now, Matt Stewart's going to write an article for us in the next day or so, sort of summarising the Premiership, Warwick. But it's an interesting time. Lucy Fiore was a jockey that we pointed out as the most improved jockey in terms of wins, and obviously based in WA. Lucia Warwick, as her maiden name was, she's doing extraordinarily well at the moment. So it is interesting to sort of see how that's playing out. And WA racing, look, I still think, and I said this to Tim a few weeks ago on this podcast, Warwick, I think it's the most underrated jurisdiction in Australia by that far. It's not funny. It has its own little world over there. It's got its own broadcasting setup. It's got its own tote. It's almost in some ways better set up than any other jurisdiction in Australia for success going forward.
Yeah, it's a bit of a head scratcher, that one with the premierships, Bren. I mean, was it five of the top six?
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, given that the concentration of racing is down that southwest end, in Perth, around there, I mean, they have a lot of country meetings, not a problem in the world with that. But, that's quite a it's a good stack.
Yeah.
It's a good stack. And
I
don't know what it means.
I'd say Willie Pike's been dominant for a long time, and Quintos and Porter and these people are doing quite well. But we're seeing other jockeys come through like Lucy Fiore and Catch Faithful as well to continue to ride those winners. And it's not like they have a glut of meetings, So it's we often see the dominant jockeys are country New South Wales or provincial New South Wales jockeys, Warwick. But when it seems to me it's switching back to WA, and there's definitely some strong competition at the top end of that jockey pool.
No, well, that's right. But on face value, you would say that the opportunities in West Australia for the top tier jockeys are probably limited compared to what can happen in New South Wales and Victoria, where you get jockeys that'll try and ride every day of the week if they can.
Just a quick look forward to next year now, or next season. I wanted to sort of put forward a couple of the bigger issues that we've sort of talked about in the straight over the journey. Warwick, you and I have covered plenty of these stories. Probably the two things which people will be looking to, where the pattern is. We're still in a situation where the agreement with Racing Australia through the pattern, and obviously those upgraded races last year from Racing New South Wales, which weren't quite recognised and whatever, that's still not resolved. And as things stand, those races that took schedule to be run at their upgraded situation, despite the fact that they're not recognised by pedigree authorities around that stuff. So you foresee that sort of rolling on for some time yet, Warwick. There's been discussions, Peter Volandes mentioned last week, we're going to work on it, we're going to get it fixed. But I've seen this story a few times, and no doubt you have as well, where it's probably unlikely we're going to see a proper resolution of this for some time yet.
Well, it's been 6 years, hasn't it, since the patent committee has actually sat down and said, okay, this is what we've got to do. But nothing's happened except those couple of moves last year, which Group 1 Everest, was it Group 1 All-Star Mile?
Yeah.
Went that way. I can't see it being resolved too soon. Although, I mean, if the same thing unfolds this year, it's probably more likely that the Golden Eagle will get to a Group 1, which it probably deserves anyway,
Yeah, and Peter Volandes mentioned that last week in his conversation with News Corp that he thinks that will happen sooner rather than later, and that won't surprise either. Probably more contentious also from a New South Wales context was obviously the Rose Hill proposal, which has dominated the last 12 months and last 18 months and a lot of our time. It's dead and buried now because of the vote, and now Peter McGowan's left the ATC, left as chairman and whatever else. But the ramifications roll on, don't they, Warwick? Because the club, the ATC, still hasn't solved its broader challenge about its longer-term business model. And, with under new chairman Tim Hale, we can probably expect to see discussions around this, around what the ATC, what the clubs do moving forward to be sort of, a key part of things over the next 12 months, you'd think.
Well, it all comes back to club sustainability, doesn't it, Brennan? I mean, New South Wales is probably a flashpoint for that because the funding model's changed over the past decade, whereas previously, clubs were able to put their hand out, TAB distribution and so forth, but now most of the race fields, or all race fields legislation goes through Racing New South Wales.
Yeah.
So that model has put a significant strain on race clubs, I would suggest, even going down to grassroots, like clubs like we've written about Goulburn over the past 12 months, and that Racing New South Wales is, taking over the freehold of that racetrack land.
Yep.
Now, down the track, Bren, that may be the model. I don't know. But it has certainly caused some angst over the past 2 years with the way that things have unfolded there. I mean, the issue with the Australian Surf Club is that selling Rosehill was pitched on the fact that the club's going backwards. You know, not financially viable at the moment. And so, I mean, it's obviously going to take something from Racing New South Wales and the ATC probably to get together on on that level to solve that issue. Otherwise, as it sits, the Australian Turf Club is probably going to continue to struggle financially.
What is kind of interesting from that perspective, from my perspective, Warwick, is that there's been some discussion about recent wagering declines and that affecting returns. This has been an issue that's been on the cards since Racefields was first introduced, 12, 13, 14 years ago now. And it was plainly clear there that parimutuel returns were going to go down and that was going to cause issues. So, I mean, it's not a surprising issue that it reaches its head now, but as we know, as we've said, the racing wheel turns slowly and it's only now they're sort of trying to, get to the nub of the issue here and how they sort it out. As mentioned before, Tim Rowe's currently in the UK. He's attending glorious Goodwood. Tim caught up with Henry Dwyer, the Ballarat-based trainer who last year captured the attention of the racing world with the victory of Asfoora at Royal Ascot. Tim caught up with Henry for an extensive chat on a way to the track this week.
It's a delight to welcome Henry Dwyer to the Straight Talk podcast this week. Obviously, Goodwood week, second up for Asfoora on Friday in a Group 2. I thought you ran well first up at Royal Ascot, Henry, and we're in Newmarket this week and she galloped pretty well yesterday.
Yeah, good to join you, Rowe. We're sat here at the services charging our electric car. Services being big petrol stations, so it's nothing glamorous as you'd expect from a Straight Talk podcast, is it? But it's nice enough. But on the way down to Goodwood for the Sussex Stakes today and looking forward to us on Friday.
It has been a big logistical exercise 2 years in a row, and as we know, she won at Royal Ascot last year and was, I think, second in this race last year as well. It takes a lot of planning, a lot of commitment from staff and obviously the owner, Akram Al-Fakri, as well to get to this point.
It certainly does, but it's been an enjoyable sort of experience. Last year, it was a challenge and it was quite rigorous and time-consuming to try and work it all out and put the jigsaw pieces together. This year, we've just sort of followed last year and we've sort of known what we're doing a bit more, so we've been able to enjoy it a bit more. But it's a new experience, and I think sometimes with training horses, you get a little bit stale at times, just doing the same thing over and over, day in, day out, week in, week out, year in, year out, really. And having the ability to have a horse like her that can allow you to do these things is pretty amazing and a great experience. So we're just trying to make the most of it. And so it's been a big sacrifice from Chanel, who's over here with the horse, and probably my family at home to allow me to do this sort of stuff. They've been over here the last few weeks. We've been able to do a bit of travelling whilst they've been here. But yeah, just being part of the whole Newmarket sort of ecosystem, I suppose, and getting to know people there and seeing different training methods and facilities and horses and all the rest of it. I think it's going to only benefit me long term.
Yeah, that was going to be our next question. Have you learned much? Newmarket is so unique in, just the hectares and hectares of land. And, I think people were saying that there's certain bits of turf that haven't been galloped on for 7 years and things like that it is so unique. But have you learned things that you perhaps could add to your training repertoire at Ballarat?
I'm not sure add to my training repertoire at Ballarat, but it has been an eye-opener as to how they do certain things, and you'll attest that it's probably different. So we sort of haven't got the luxury of having acres and acres and acres of grass, which would be an absolute luxury. But having one horse here, obviously I've had a fair bit of spare time, so I've spent a lot of time with guys like Harry Eustace and Amy Murphy and Lemos de Souza, and sort of just seeing what they do with their horses. And they work their horses very different to what we do, and it's mainly geared towards staying races and preparing horses for longer term rather than the here and now. And William Haggis said to me yesterday, he said, in Australia, we're all about trying to get the horses to go faster and quicker, and here they're trying to get them to go slower and longer. So I thought that was a pretty good way of putting it. And everything they do is just geared towards making them go slower and steadier and getting in a good frame and a good rhythm. And that's probably counterproductive for sprinters. You want them sort of bouncing and up on their toes and electric and ready to explode like the coiled spring. But with the stayers, they're really there to get in a good rhythm. And that starts from pretty much the day they're broken in, or the start of their break-in process.
And for me to witness as well is just the number of riders and track riders, and can be strings of up to 50 at a time, which almost no stable in Australia has that luxury, and track work finishes at 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning. If you're lucky in Australia, here they're still working horses at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. It is different that, Australian trainers can't do that.
Yeah. The word luxury is pretty up there, I'd say. That is amazing to watch. Most of these bigger stables, they've got between 100 and 150 horses. They have 3 lots a morning usually. So 3 lots into 150, that's 50 riders. And they saddle the horses up. They warm them up. They work them. They bring them home. They unsaddle them. They hose them. They give them a pick of grass. They put them on the walk, or they put them away. If we tried to train like that in Australia, we go broke just because we pay our track work riders so much because they're a scarce commodity. So it is amazing to see our riders, in a stable of 50 like ours. We probably got 3, and when we're flying, we've got 4 track riders. So treadmills are a big thing in Australia. Our riders probably ride 10 or 11 each a morning, whereas here, as we said, they're sort of just everything's slow and patient, and we sort of unfortunately, as a nation and as an industry, have to rush to try and get things done.
And we had Will Friedman on the Straight Talk podcast last week talking about the costs of training and owning, of course. Part of that, I think, as you say, is labour. I think Will suggested, and getting track riders is so hard. I think the visa laws in Australia are so much more difficult to attract or be able to get international riders in to fill those gaps.
Yeah, there's a few interesting aspects to it. Like, as we said, there's winter here is not overly palatable, and a lot of them try and come to Australia for their winter break and work for 6 months. But there's a lot of people working here that would jump at a chance to be paid year round for what they're getting paid, what work they're doing versus what they're doing here, and what we pay versus what they get paid here. But we just sort of can't get a lot of them in through various visa restrictions. They can do their, first year, second year, third year, then be sponsored and that sort of stuff. But realistically, it's the South Americans and I suppose other Europeans that we could get that aren't eligible for our visas through lack of English and that sort of stuff. They now have to go for a working holiday visa or a sponsorship visa. They have to be able to pass an English test when they first get there, which used to be 6 years later when they'd had a chance to work on their English. So speaking to Lemos de Souza, he said there's 1,000 Joe Moreiras working in South America that would come over at the drop of a hat that are working for $50 a week, and they'd be there in a heartbeat. We just can't get them there because they're not eligible for our visas. So I think that I just think it's the horse is bolted in terms of training our own staff of track riders and educating our track riders. We just don't have people that grow up with horses anymore. Kids grow up with motorbikes, not horses, and we're not really a rural sort of country anymore, as maybe the 60s, 70s, 80s sort of allowed that to happen. Now it's just all too hard. So I think we just need to not worry about everyone's concerned about having a track riding school and this and that, but we haven't got enough people to go to it to make it worthwhile, and we need to focus on getting them from overseas and sponsoring our workers and opening up a few more borders in that respect.
Back on Asfoora, I did speak to Akram last week and published on Monday that understandably he's got a huge attachment to Asfoora, possibly the best horse he's probably had. Not completely aware of his history, but, and would be the best broodmare he'd have at Nora Lane if she did come home. But in terms of selling her, she would have huge commercial appeal, and particularly up here in the Northern Hemisphere, is that something you're pushing or certainly getting Akram to consider?
That's a decision for Akram and his family, his brothers, Dan and Moses, that they'll make that call. But he's always said he's keen to sort of probably more so treat her a bit like a gelding. As you said, it's not maybe the best horse he's had. It's definitely the best horse he's had, and that's not definitely the best broodmare he's had. It's definitely the best broodmare probably most people are ever going to have as well. She's a trophy mare. She's a Group 1 Royal Ascot winner, and they don't go to market very often, if ever. So that'll sort of obviously make her worth a lot of money when she goes to sale, if she used to go to sale, but also it'll be hard for Akram to let her go. And he's keen to keep her going as long as she can, and if she wins one of these races at Goodwood or York and she comes through the preparation, well, who's to say she can't come back next year? I think she's got good earning capacity on the race course as well for as long as he wants to race her, and she's relatively sound and coping with it all. So that could be an option as well. There's the option of getting her in foal here and bringing her home either Southern Hemisphere time or Northern Hemisphere time and leaving her here for next year. It's just, there's options there, and it's just, there's no point putting the cart before the horse until we sort of get to the end of this preparation. But, if she was to be sold here, it'd most likely be at the December sale. If she goes home, it'll be after, we've exhausted options here with Ireland and France. So we'll cross that bridge when we come to it.
You think she'd be worth more here in the Northern Hemisphere, just possibly just because of the currency conversion, but just what she's done here as opposed to Australia?
I just think those mares are worth more here in general. I think mares in Australia are probably a little bit undervalued still on a global scale. Plus, you've got the currency conversion. It's obviously pounds to dollars isn't overly attractive for us at the moment. And their achievements here are probably more so than in Australia. As I said before, like Group 1 Ascot mares don't come on the market very much. And when those good mares like that do, they make a lot of money here in sterling, which is pretty palatable to Australians.
Yeah. It's not all just about, Goodwood, and you've got still running a stable at home, and you've got a couple of nice horses or international European imports potentially running at Flemington on Saturday, Côte Atlantique as he's known, and Paradise Storm.
Yeah, both really nice horses, different horses, both similar in the fact that they came here and they were desperate to be gelded, and hence we have. They both had a run as a colt, but Paradise Storm was just, desperate to be gelded. Côte Atlantique benefited from it. Paradise Storm's a nice staying horse. He won't be at his peak till he's probably 2,400 metres plus. He ran well first up at Ballarat. He had a setback after that, and then ran well off the back of a setback in Adelaide. Hard to find races for horses like this rated A in in Côte Atlantique's case in their 90s and Paradise Storm's case mid-70s. So I think they'll be a bit sharp from over 2,000 Paradise Storm on Saturday, but there's a nice 2,400 metre 78 not far after that. And then Côte Atlantique, just a kick-off point, and he's a nice probably 1,400 metre miler on soft tracks, I reckon. He's rated right up to being the horse he is, so there's not a lot of wiggle room there, but it's pretty well known. Bar Cummings used to sort of start his nice sort of spring horses in a race like the Ori Star. I just think down the straight, it's an easy reintroduction to racing, and those, horses that want further don't get run off their feet because they do probably sit up for the first 600 of these straight races and then just sprint home. So it's more like a jump out for those sort of horses, but he is going well, Côte Atlantique, and I think he will be a really nice horse, and he's a really nice horse, but might just be a bit sharp from over 1,200.
And attracting those two horses to the stable, I guess, Asfoора's deeds last year certainly helped and allowed you to sell down Côte Atlantique and OTI, Terry Henderson, giving you Paradise Storm.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was probably not the unintended consequence of last year, but the upside over here of last year was that I met a lot of people that facilitated these sort of horses. I didn't have much to do with Paradise Storm, in fairness. Terry bought that in France and offered it to us to train, which was great. But in Côte Atlantique's case, that was Sam Haggis, who's William Haggis's son. He sort of sourced that horse, the sales, and did all the data on it and the research, and said this was the one to buy. And knowing people in Newmarket and being able to sort of be here for the sale, and that really helps, I think, in that sort of those tried horse sales, actually seeing the product. We bought 2 horses there. The other horse, a nice horse, Palace Green as well. He had 1 or 2 runs last prep and gone to the paddock. But yeah, they're expensive horses. It's fraught with danger because they're tried horses with various issues at times, and you got to work your way through that minefield. But it's a lot better knowing people and knowing people who've had things to do with those horses. And I wouldn't have done that if it wasn't for being here last year.
Henry, we better get to Goodwood. It's tough life. Thanks, Bren. Put that on the expenses, and thanks for joining us on Straight Talk.
Cheers, Rowe. Look forward to it.
The following segment is brought to you by Darley. Let's talk about what makes a stallion stand out. First, the pedigree. Buy a champion sire out of a Group 3 winning Street Cry mare, and that Danehill Street Cry cross that's produced the likes of Farnan and Animo. Now the performance. Silver Slipper winner, Todman winner, runner-up in the Golden Slipper. But here's the clincher. He trained on. He came back at 3, won the Vane, and then the Newmarket. When you put it all together, it's hard to argue. Cylinder, standing at Derby. Breeding and livestock news now, Warwick, and a quick reflection on the season results, the sire championships, etc. We'll see a new champion sire crowned in Australia this year.
Exactly. Zoustar, and rightly so too.
Yeah.
Like a great colonial stallion, Bren, as you pointed out to me the other day. So it's 3 generations before we find something international in his pedigree. Yeah.
Yep. And he's the first 3rd generation Australian bred sire since Grand Flaneur. Now, you and I are not young spring chickens anymore, but 1894 seems like a long time ago. So that was the last time a champion sire in Australia had 3 generations of their sires in Australia. Of course, being by Northern Meteor, who was then by Costa Largo. So it's an extraordinary chain and a great result for Widden as well.
Certainly is. I think it's his Widden's first champion sire since Masque.
Yep.
Going back about 92, I think.
Yep.
Not too sure. Yep.
30-odd years,
So-
yep, that's right.
Yeah.
The
I
first
mean-
season size?
First season size.
Champion
And
there,
of
Ole
course it is.
Ole Kirk. He's obviously had a remarkable year. Farnan is actually ahead of him on winners, which is a good sign as well. So that's useful. That's I guess important as well for Kirora, given the investment they've put into Farnan. So, but yeah, a couple of obviously horses which have strong race profiles coming through there too, Warwick.
Golden Slipper winner there in Farnham.
Yep.
Yeah. No, it all goes well for those horses because we need U-Blood in the game.
Yep.
And I mean, we've got a couple of old stages there. Father Time is starting to catch up with, well, will do with some of those horses. I mean, I'm Invincible still there, and you'll keep churning out winners. But it's like any industry, Brent. It just needs to keep rejuvenating, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly right. I mean, the other thing about that, we've got Two Darn Hod, who's a champion second season sire. He was champion first season sire last year. He's the first internationally bred horse to win first season and second season champion sire in Australia since Danehill. So that's a significant little correlation there. And Dali have obviously bringing him back. That's a big result for Australian breeding, and there's a lot of excitement around him. He's had 10 stake winners from his crop this year. Fastnet Rock, champion broodmare sire for the second year running. Snitzel, top 2-year-old sire. R.I.P. Snitzel, what an extraordinary career he had and would continue to produce star horses. A written tycoon. You talk about the greybeards before. He's champion 3-year-old sire this year, and that was the year that he stood at Arrowfield before he went to Geelong. So there's still a bit to come yet from Written Tycoon, albeit his fertility is quite low at this stage, but his next couple of generations of horses coming through from that Geelong crop will be significant enough as well. A quick look across the ditch. Saddleville wins his 10th New Zealand sire title. It was a big week for Waikato Stud. Actually, they were celebrating being crowned New Zealand Breeder of the Year this week. What I also want to focus on, Warwick, is the Shuttleshire contingent making their way over here. Coolmore announced this week that their 4 horses from Ireland, Wooten Bassett, who's the most expensive sire ever to stand in Australia, City of Troy, Storm Boy, and St Mark's Basilica are all on their way. Now, City and Troy and Storm Boy are both significant because, of course, their sons of Justify having their first seasons in Australia. So that's an important one for Coolmore. But Warwick, looking at the list of stallions we've got starting at stud this year, which, of course, the breeding season starts on the 1st of September, there is a sense of anticipation about this new crop coming through, particularly with broadsiding at Darley.
Yeah, well, probably as a racehorse, broadsiding is familiar to Australian breeders and so forth. He's probably one of the most anticipated, isn't he? Broadsiding, and he'll be joined by traffic warden there, the Kelvin side. So it's probably one of the legacies that departing trainer James Cummings will leave with Godolphin Darley set up. Yeah. Then we have Switzerland, of course, the Cornwall Stud Stakes winner. He'll join the other 2 horses that you mentioned there. Widden, American Sprinter Cogburn.
Yep.
And Arrowfield. They're going to introduce Van Dijk this year, so that'll be interesting.
Yeah, I mean, Arrowfield going for a shuttle stand is interesting enough. And so Widden, an American Sprinter, we spoke to Anthony Thompson back at Easter and had a good chat with him about that and what he thinks that horse will bring to Widden, which it'll be interesting to see what happens there. And not just for Hunter Valley either, Warwick. There's a host of sires, interesting sires kicking off in Victoria this year.
Yeah, well, the Victorian breeding industry seems to be having a little bit of a mini resurgence. First season sires there will be Schwartz. He's off to Rosemont, obviously. Southport Tycoon to Widden. Growing Empire to Geelong. And the Doncaster winner, Celestial Legend, he'll turn up at Woodside. Plus there's a few others, I think.
Yeah, there are plenty of others there. But yeah, it is a strong, the Victorian, to have sort of 4 or 5 Victorian stallions starting out at, that $20,000 plus mark is a sign of the robustness of the Victorian industry at the moment. So, yeah, and just going back to that conversation we had before about, Coolmore Stakes winners and Golden Rose winners. We've got Broadsiding, who won a Golden Rose, and Switzerland, who won a Coolmore. Both, probably the most anticipated local horses. There is no Golden Slipper colt going to stud this year because that crop's Golden Slipper was won by Lady Camelot, who was a filly. So Yeah, so it does intensify the speculation, intensify a little bit. Really interesting time for Dahlia, I think. It's an exciting time in some ways. Obviously, it's a big switch in terms of their racing plans, but we've also got the stock of Animo coming through now, and they've got a genuine star in broadsiding Gerardo Levy's stamp as well. So, significant time for them.
Sorry, looks promising for Animo based on his returns at the weaning sales earlier this year. Yeah, but I agree with that. I mean, if they can kick a goal with broadsiding, well, yep, that'll be good for them.
Yeah, and they've got they've got Two Down Hot obviously there at the moment. They've got a host of they've probably got the best lot of younger stallions they've had for a very long time. The following segment is brought to you by Inglis. Entries for the 2026 Inglis Select Yearling sales are now open. In 2025, Inglis was the only Australasian auction house to increase live auction yearling turnover year on year, with its overall yearling average and median the best in the business by some 31% and 45.5% respectively. There will again be 4 yearling sales at Inglis next year: Classic, Premier, Easter and HTBA. Easter will be headlined by the presence of the highly anticipated colt by Schnitzel out of Winks. To discuss the placement of your yearlings for 2026, contact a member of the Inglis Bloodstock team in Sydney or Melbourne. Contact details are on the Inglis website, as well as the 2026 entries brochure, entry forms and a promotional video. Entries close on Friday, August 15. We round off now, Warwick, with a little bit of a look at the wagering world. I want to add a little bit of a breaking news item in here. I'm interested to see Jason Scott bob up at a company, the bookie group, who are the parent company of PonyBet, a sort of emerging player in the corporate bookmaking landscape. Jason, of course, has got a great heritage in wagering, spent 2 years as CEO of Racing Queensland. Probably not surprising to see him bob up back on the wagering landscape, but significant nonetheless, Warwick, for someone we've had a little bit to do with over the journey.
Yeah, straight shooter, Jason. My mark was incorrect there. Someone told me he was heading off to the Cowboys, the NRL side. But yeah, no, that is a significant move. As an absolute expert in the wagering game, I think no one can doubt that.
Yeah, I think maybe structuring your approaches might be better suited in wagering than it was in racing administration. A little bit of a nasty clip across the year for Betfair this week. They were fined $900,000 for breach of spam regulation by the Australian Communications and Media Authority. That comes after a $4 million fine from ACMA for Tabcorp and large fines for PointsBet and Unibet over the past couple of months. It's a challenging environment at the moment, regulatory-wise, and particularly challenging for Betfair right now. His margins have been affected by a lot of the issues we discuss week on week. So the future of the exchange is an interesting space, Warwick. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts. Across the journey, Betfair has been a really useful tool for Australian punters, particularly those who are more on the, professional side, or more on the sides that rely upon the exchange to get money on and off and all that type of thing. I'm not saying, look, a $900,000 fine is not going to be fatal for Betfair, but it can't be a positive thing, and it's just a very challenging model for how exchanges can work, isn't it?
Well, I've got to say, Bren, probably the exchange probably hasn't resonated so much with Australian punters as it has elsewhere in the world. I mean, it's the barometer in UK racing, and to some extent it is here, but the rank and file punter, I don't think, has actually grasped the concept of the exchange, and that's made it difficult.
You're right
for that organisation.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I think what the other strange thing is that the average punter in Australia is not price sensitive. So maybe the product hasn't really appealed. Product has really led a lot of the growth and innovation in the Australian market, and it's been product led by these big guys, the sports bets, Entain, to probably less extent Tabcorp from a product point of view, but they've led the way with strong product. And maybe Betfair's, because in Australia doesn't have control over its product, it's reliant on sort of the parent company, not parent company, but the company out of the UK. Betfair is actually owned by Crown in Australia, not owned by Betfair or Paddy Power, which is a bit of a weird arrangement. But perhaps that products play a part of that. But it always does surprise me that in a world where we talk about punters struggling to make margins work better than ever, that there's not more of a move towards, a better pricing model in theory.
Well, I mean, a lot of punters complain about lack of innovation in the wagering space, but here's Betfair. It's been around for 25 years now, I think. I mean, that is an innovative betting tool. But the problem with it is that what I find is that it's very labour intensive. You know, I mean, you got to be on it. You got to be on it. You can't miss a thing on it, really. I mean, I don't think the rank and file punter in Australia is prepared to make that commitment to it. You know,
I think phrase liquidity is life for them. If they don't have liquidity, they have nothing, and so that's part of the challenge. So anyway, I'd be interested to see what pans out going forward. Before we round up wagering, just a little mention here that the BetR just in the last half an hour lobbed another $40 million worth of shares on top of their off points bet. So my mail last week that this battle for BetR, battle between BetR and Mixie over points bet is not going anywhere. Well, it's just going to keep dragging on. I think it looks pretty strong. I think we might be talking about this for a while yet and continue to work through. All right. Thanks for joining for the Stroke Talk, brought to you by our sponsors, Inglis and Darley. Don't forget to give us a rating wherever you're listening to us, be it on Podbean, Apple, Spotify, watching us on YouTube, wherever you choose to. Give us a rating, send a comment, send us an email at editor@thestraight.com.au and let us know what you think or what we should be talking about. And always happy to have your feedback, and we'll talk to you again next week.